17 years because I always volunteered. I was on the board chair, and then served as an interim executive director twice. So passing it on to.
Yeah, before you do that, thank you very much, Sue. Before you do that, I'd be remiss if I didn't properly introduce Ben. Because Ben and I have known each other for going on 30 years. And we've started, thank you for reminding me. But Ben is truly one of not just our strongest community leaders, but the one of the most preeminent ones here in DC. And we are so proud to have him represent us to the office that he leads. And so Ben, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Rodney, and sorry to do math. My name is Ben de Guzman. I am not a straight shooter, but I am grateful for the warm introduction and to be here with Sue and Rodney, as well as our guests. As Rodney said, I am the director for the Mayor's Office on Asian and Pacific Islander Affairs. I won't go too much into my own story. Hopefully it will come out in as we talk, but I will say just a little bit about our office. We are the largest office of our kind in the country. With much love to our friends in California, with much love to our friends from Minnesota, New York. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs is a slight exception to that, but I think that we have a different enough mission that I can still say that. But we're again, in terms of local government agencies that center Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, there is no agency that's larger than ours. So I think it's important to say because we are the face for our community, for the mayor. I always say that we represent Mayor Bowser to the community, but we also advocate for the community in city government. I've been in the nonprofit sector for many years before joining the city government 8 years ago. I worked on a whole variety of issues: civil rights, LGBTQ equity, veterans equity, and so I am just, fortunate to have been here in DC for a long time and to be part of a lot of many different movements. And hopefully we can pass that mantle on to you. So thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Ben. And last but not least, Constancio, who is joining us virtually, I believe from Hawaii. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I hope my audio is coming through fine.
We hear you just fine. Constancio, before you introduce yourself to the group, I have greetings from John Victoria, your classmate from Philbrook, who tell you to say hello. So
please, that is awesome.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
John was actually my roommate during that program, so very happy to hear that. But yeah, I'm very grateful to be a part of this panel with Sue and Ben and Rodney. Thank you so much. Aloha, everyone. Mahalo for the opportunity to be a part of this discussion. My name is Constancio Paranal III. I am a board member at CAPAL, and that's why I'm very excited to be a part of the Washington Leadership Program. And in my day-to-day job, I work as the Director of Grants, Innovation and Technology at the City and County of Honolulu. And I know those are three broad areas, but my work primarily, if I were to just kind of sum it up, it's really about relationship building and connecting people and institutions. My work primarily is focused on advancing programs, municipal services that bring equity into government, especially for communities that are historically underserved or unserved. And those initiatives could be in digital equity, it could be in small business recovery, or even food systems. And my path to public service is deeply personal. I didn't grow up thinking that I would be in government. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and I immigrated to the United States after college. And for someone who just immigrated to the US, it was an entirely new environment for me. And at that time, my main concern was truly to understand the environment and to navigate the system. And essentially, like many other immigrants who come to the US or any other place, it's really to survive. I just wanted to survive the system that I was in because later on I realized that the system wasn't really made for me, right? And so my path to government actually started in Washington, D.C. I was part of a fellowship, like many of you, serving at DC public schools. And and over time, I realized that survival wasn't enough. And it's not just about navigating the system. You know, a lot of people say that the system is broken, but I disagree. The system actually works, but only for people that it was intended to work for and it was designed for. And so my goal was really being in local government, and I also work in state government to shape that system, not to fix it, but to help shape that system. So I pursued public service, not because I don't think government is perfect, but because I believe it could be better. And I've seen how powerful that tool can be when people who are usually not part of the system are finally in positions to create change within the institution. So I believe in government. You know, a lot of people look at government as kind of like the enemy, but I do believe that it is the most powerful tool that we have to make equity and change tangible and real, but only if we are bold enough to actually use it.
Thank you very much, Constanzo. That was great. Let's go ahead and get into some questions so that we can be sure that we have enough time for questions and answers from all of you, from any of the panelists. You know, we're living in a very unprecedented time. A lot of upheaval, and let's just call it what it is. There's a broadband assault on efforts related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So my question to the panelists, just to start off, is how are you navigating through these waters now in this new time of anti-DEI? How does it impact your organization? How does it impact your government office? How does it impact your community work? Sue, do you want to start?
Sure. Definitely these are some really tough times. Our organization name is Asian American Lead, so you really can't get away from that. You know, we are definitely at a time of challenge, especially when it comes to funding priorities, not just from the federal government, but also from corporations that are like really fearful of saying that they support DEI just because they don't know how that might impact them. So this has been, I would say, especially the last 6 months, difficult. But you know, we're gonna push through this. And I think the big thing is that, you know, you're gonna be hit with different challenges. We're gonna be hit with different challenges no matter what. And you just have to stay strong. Building community is about reaching out because there are going to be those that say, you know what, I want to support more because we know other people are cutting back. So you just have to work on finding who those people that really do want to support and help you to push forward. So.
And did you want?
Yeah, just to build off of what Sue said, and in the interest of full transparency, we administer a grant program that specifically makes investments from city government to Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities. AA Lead is one of our grantees, as is CAPAL, and as is the Washington English Center. And I like to think that the conversations we helped catalyze amongst our grantees kind of resulted in this partnership. So hopefully, no, because we see the work that they do being so important in directly making an impact on people's lives in our communities, in an environment, as folks have said, that is under attack. You know, I can talk about the $1 billion shortfall that city government is facing either this year as well as another $1 billion for the next fiscal year. But What I would say, just in a very broad sense, is for folks, especially who's from here or who's in the area like that. What I would say, especially to people who are not in this area, remember what this feels like. Remember that sense of like putting on the news in the morning or talking to your boss who's about to lose their job. Remember what it's like, because the folks that live where you come from are not going to experience what's happening in the same way. So if we sound like we're tearing our hair out or like the building's on fire, it is. And I will, I'll be the first person to admit that. But what I will say is, and we're doing what we can in city government to make sure that resources are available for our communities. As a side note, we are having our pre-bidders grants meeting next week, which I think all of our grantees know. But let me just close by also talking about the personal impact. Like take care of yourselves. Pursue, self-care. I actually feel like doing community stuff like this is part of my self-care regimen. So I want to thank you because talking to people, talking to like-minded people, really reminds me of why I do this work, and that there are other people who are doing this work with me. So.
Ms. Sasha, do you want to add anything to the question about the current status of anti-DEI and how it may be affecting you in the world?
Yeah, right, definitely. I think there's, like what you had mentioned, is so many challenges that are impacting our community. And for many of us who are very passionate about this work and are advocating for our communities, we will be faced with these challenges and we will encounter them. And so how do I navigate it? I think for me, definitely there have been several moments where I've been told to, tone it down or, wait for, be realistic, wait for your own turn, et cetera, things like that. And I have seen how gatekeeping operates in subtle ways, and ideas being dismissed, voices getting silenced, and ultimately the support system disappears when things are not being noticed, like with what's happening with DEI. But I've also learned how to, for lack of a better term, navigate those systems by building coalitions, by reframing the narrative. And I think it's really important for us to understand that we have that power to frame and reframe the narrative, finding mentors and like what the other two panelists had mentioned, staying grounded in your values, especially when it's difficult. And one of the things that I learned in this line of work is that change or advocacy doesn't happen because the system allows for it to happen. It happens because people like us, inside and outside the system, push for that change anyway, right? So believe in your power. I think everyone in this room needs to understand that you are a unit of power. So how do you use that unit of power that you have? Yeah, that's how I tend to navigate that system.
Nice, a unit of power. I like that. Sounds so unit of power. Let me turn this over to the group here and just do a quick roll call to the units of power before me. How many of you either currently attend or recently attended and graduated from a school that may be on the West Coast? Raise your hand. Okay, put it on. What about somewhere in the Midwest? I think I see one. Anybody in the South? Okay, nice, okay. What about here in the Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast? The remainder of you? Okay. I'm asking because I think we can say without any hesitation that despite where your university or your college may be, the assault on DEI also extends to higher education. And so many of you have probably seen either protests or strikes or some type of demonstration for what is taking place in a greater picture. And so, my question to the panelists is this, there is a lot of these types of events where it would be easy to feel disillusioned. Even as a young person, a hopeful, bright-eyed young person, you might feel disillusioned or even exhausted because who's listening, right? Like, why are we doing all of this? Why are we fighting? But what words of advice would you give the units of power in front of us to keep them motivated, to keep fighting the good fight?
Yeah, I'd like to start. I was actually looking at this question in particular. I first met Rodney actually when we were both college students. He was here at GW. He was at GW here in DC. I was at the University of California at Berkeley. Berkeley has its own tradition of protests. The chancellor was just here in DC testifying in front of the House of Representatives around ostensibly anti-Semitism, but really discussing these issues about student activism and protest. And it really speaks to my history at Berkeley, working on issues like Filipino American studies and institutionalizing our existence on campus. I think there's a lot of kind of self-care things that we could talk about. But what I would say for folks who are student activists or who are working for change is try to keep kind of an eye on the broader picture. When we were fighting for a tenure denial case for the only person on campus who was teaching Filipino American studies, it occurred to me that as we were protesting the Asian American Studies department on our campus, it occurred to me that that movement, that department itself, coming out of the Third World Liberation Strike, came as a result of student activism. So I wondered like what they must think of us as like these young kids like trying to affect change and what their role was in terms of mentoring us, but also representing the administration. So what I would say is, keep an eye on the larger picture also. And I think empathy is something that can be difficult, especially when the people when people are doing such, oh God, I can't even say it, are doing things that are very opposed to your moral code. Let me say it that way. But I think it's important to think about the humanity that we all share, and also holding fast to your values. There's a lot of stories in this room around activism, and I think just keeping an eye on the larger picture.
Just something brief and listening to something that Ben said, I feel like it's really important when Ben talks about making sure you do self-care, don't let the negative and the dissolution get you down. And make sure that when you are feeling that way, that you reach out to others that are positive and that continue to pull you up. Everything in life is cycles. Just like you wake up and one day's a good day and one day's a bad day, or today's a sunny day and tomorrow's a rainy day. It will pass. And that's what you have to hold on to and know that there is something brighter coming. So that temporary down is not permanent. I think that's really key.
That's absolutely great life advice too. Constancio, I'm wondering if you have any nuggets to share with the units of power before us.
Units of power, yes. So, I've been in this space. We have this organization called Hawaii Coalition for Immigrant Rights. And one thing that I learned being a part of that coalition is that social change it's difficult, it's challenging. And I think anyone who's been in it will feel the exhaustion, and it gets really tiring. And so the idea and the advice of self-care is very important. because many times you will be asked to carry someone else's weight. And it often feels like, you're carrying the entire world. But I think the best thing to keep in mind is that you're not doing it alone, that there are people that are with you in that coalition or amongst your friends who are also pushing for the same change, who are also experiencing the same thing. And so exhaustion is valid. And when we think about movements, those are not built in waves. Sometimes they're silent ripples. Sometimes they rest. And so when you feel that exhaustion, remember that it is okay to take some time for yourself. It is okay to pass the mic to someone else. It is okay to recharge, to step back. It doesn't mean that you're giving up. It just means that you're taking care of yourself, of what is important to you, that is part of you, in order to be able to continue the fight. Because it's a long journey. And that's how you're going to tire yourself. You're just going to go all in and you're not going to stop. So even when it feels like no one is listening to you, always remember that someone else out there, and this is what I learned, is someone else is watching. And that person or that individual will be able to speak, to voice out their thoughts because they saw you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Let me ask the panelists this question. Is there some moment in your personal history that you can, that is very vivid in your head, that is a very crystallized moment of, that you would define as a moment of protest? Maybe something that in your, again, past, you're like, I remember that. Let me start and give you an example of what I'm thinking about. Is that, it was around 1997, 1998, we were protesting on behalf of the Filipino World War II veterans that were denied their aid and recognition. And a bunch of students at George Washington were asked to go participate in these protests, and they were back right in front of the White House. Back when we could still do those kinds of things, right? There were like probably like 150, 200 of us protesting, but alongside us were actual veterans, Filipino American veterans in their 70s, 80s that were marching right alongside us. And the moment that I am talking about that crystallizes it for me, that knew that I had to always fight for what I believe in our community, was when these septuagenarians and octogenarians allow themselves to be handcuffed to the gates of the White House. Imagine that, you're 70, 80 years old in the middle of July, as hot as it is outside today. Imagine how hot it was back then if you're 70 or 80 years old and you allow yourself to be handcuffed to prove a point, to make a statement that you deserve what you were promised. And that for me is an amazing moment, because I watched them with my own two eyes get arrested and taken away. But they were willing to stand up for what they believed in. And for me, that's everything. That moment is ablazing forever in my mind, because when I think of, I need to fight, that's the moment that I see in my head. And I'm curious if the panelists have any similar moment like that, that defines their day-to-day fight. Ben?
I sorry to grab the mic. I do wanna, because the work that we began as students, both here in in Washington DC, as well as in places like LA, where our veterans were also chaining themselves not to the White House, but to other buildings across the country. It took 20 years, but we were ultimately able to get them a payment, the creation of the Filipino American Veterans Equity Fund, and also ultimately a Congressional Gold Medal. So one of my takeaways from that and the work that it took low those 20 years was something that you would think I said also, and that is that change takes time. We can't have patience in terms of how we do the work, but we also have to recognize that it does require patience. So, but that said, I actually did want to tell sort of my origin story. When I was in Berkeley, I didn't do any Asian American stuff. I didn't join our Filipino club on campus. I didn't feel like I needed to prove who I was by joining those clubs and whatever. But my sophomore year, I learned that a Filipina student leader on our campus had been murdered in our student activities building. I hadn't met her, I didn't know who she was. But going to the memorial service at our local church, and seeing the community wrap its arms around each other and wrap their arms around her and her family, was a gut check for me. Like, what was I doing? You know, I was like playing volleyball, I was hanging out. And so the romanticized version of that story is it changed my life forever and set me on the path that I'm walking on today. The reality is I took Tagalog that following fall, and half of the class were leaders in the student organization on campus. And so the lesson there is recruit, 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 and you never know where you're going to find the next person who will dedicate their life to the movement. And change happens in the place where you might least expect it.
I'm telling you, these guys are killing me up here because I don't have stories like that, but I can say that definitely, you know, we're in the youth development space at AA Lead and just fighting every day for Asian Americans to be seen and heard. I mean, that's a lot. I just know coming to this country, like the resources that we have today, we didn't have back then. And so when we say change takes time, you just gotta stay consistent, stay on it, and know that it's gonna get better.
Sasha, did you have one moment you'd like to describe?
I mean, yeah, I think we're working for a government. Sort of the Office of Economic Revitalization is one of the newer offices within the mayor's office here at the city and county of Honolulu. It was actually built to distribute funds, federal funds during the pandemic, because nobody really knew what to do with money coming from federal government and how to support the community during the pandemic. And so the Office of Economic Revitalization was formed. And in my particular area, what I gravitated on was really pushing for digital equity. It wasn't really the top of mind for a lot of people. And we really didn't have the data, if you will, to really support why this initiative needs to be supported. But I do, being a technologist myself, I really felt that this was something that is essential and not just a side issue. And so we had to go out into the communities and really learn from the communities what is impacting them and how lack of internet connection or access to these resources is hindering them or impacting their lifestyle. And we went all over the island and surveyed close to 500 individuals, and just to give us enough data to be able to justify why we need to invest in this particular initiative. And it is really interesting when you think about the city and county of Honolulu, which has about 1 million 1 million population, and the center of commerce and finance here in Hawaii. But there are about 16% of our population that are not connected to the internet. And some people would say, what, 16%? That's nothing. Let's focus on the other islands and the other counties, right? But when you really think about access to broadband or access to internet, you're really thinking about access to jobs, access to schools, or even help from government, when almost all of the social services are through internet or devices. And so we created, through that, we were able to create our first city-led digital equity initiative here at the city and county of Honolulu. And it was really working with private corporations and private partners to get people connected, to understand that problem, especially for those who are left out. So just a great reminder that you're not by yourself when you're in this fight, that there are some people that are willing to help and are part of this ecosystem. You just need to be able to share that message and allow that story and that message to resonate with them as well.
That's a great words of advice, Constance, so thank you very much. We could probably stay here for a while and talk about a lot of our different success stories that you guys can learn from, but I'd like to ask the panelists to think of not a success, but a failure in their community building. Something that did not go as planned. Something that either went wrong because of something that maybe you did, or maybe a misstep within your strategy, something that just did not work out the way you wanted it to. Tell us about that story of failure, but more importantly, what was your takeaway? What is the one thing that you said as you reviewed what happened in your mind? This is what I'm going to do next time. What can these leaders before us take away as they are navigating through their professional careers? Who's first? It's not easy to talk about failures, but thank you.
So I'll say it this way. I feel like every day that you go out there is really that I tell people I'm an introvert, nobody believes me. But I'm an introvert. And I say that because my first choice is to just hide at home and be quiet by myself. And I'd rather email to someone than have to call them. But that's like honestly how I feel deep down inside. But in order to like really get people on your side to make your point, you gotta pick up the phone. You gotta call them. You gotta go see them in person. And so what I really want to say is when you're hit with challenges, and I'm going to say there are probably more challenges and failures, but you get strong from it. You think about what you learn every time, even relationships. I think about like, okay, why didn't that work? What did I learn? And then you try not to make the same ones again. And then secondly is if you're trying to win a battle, okay, prove your point, get people on your side. You gotta get out there and start with one person at a time to build that community, to build your like-minded people. And that, once you have that, and it takes, I will tell you, anytime I wanted to like sort of get people on my side, I go one by one by one. Because if you try to do it and skip that step in a large group, all you need is that one negative person that can burst the whole bubble and it backfires. So I usually go one by one and then see where people are at, give them my stance, right? But I also make sure I listen to what they have to say and why do they think the way they're thinking. And then I really try to because everyone wants to tell you how they think. But most of the time, we're in such a rush to get it done, we're not taking that step back. And only then, once you build that connection with them, you can win them over. So to me, I think that every sort of failure should strengthen you. And every time that you hit a brick wall, think about this. Failure's not an option. So what do I do to get that win? And you'll get there.
Advice. Constancio, are you able to share with us perhaps a story of failure and how you navigated through it and what your takeaway was?
Sure. I think so. Again, when we started, nobody really knew how to deal with the pandemic. There was no blueprint that we could point to. There was no Bible, like how do you navigate the pandemic? I think that was true for all of us. And for the city and county, there were a lot of businesses that were closing down, and many were truly impacted by it. And so when these monies came through we didn't really have the framework to how do we distribute the monies to as efficiently and as effectively as possible to the communities before people lose their jobs or lose their businesses, right? And so we had our first tranche, we were able to distribute the money, but later on we realized that it wasn't really hitting the people who are really in need. And part of it is because federal grants or federal money tend to be onerous when it comes to requirements. And what we realize in our communities, particularly for immigrant-owned businesses, if you will, Filipinos, those owned by Filipinos, Micronations, even Native Hawaiians, they were not able to access this federal aid, either because there was a language barrier, there's a lot of paperwork, and sometimes there's just that lack of trust in government. And so for the second turnaround, we had to redesign the process. And we have to be very intentional and thoughtful with how we redesign the process. What happens usually in government is you design the process and then you implement it and execute it. And sometimes there is some consultation with the community, but for the most part, sometimes you just create the solution and here it is, right? And so it was very important for us we know that we need to simplify the application. We know that we need to translate the materials to make sure that people who have limited English proficiency are able to, they understand how they're going to apply. But one thing that was very, very helpful was really partnering with cultural navigators or community navigators and funded community groups, because they are the ones that are really anchored in their communities and they truly understand the challenges that those communities face. And so I think for us, the learning truly was there's always a tendency to come with a solution and to develop a solution, but that solution shouldn't just be done by one entity. And in this case, government. That solution has to be co-created with the communities that they are supposed to serve, right? You don't just invite them to here's the solution, this is how it's going to address your problem, but allowing them to really provide input in the design and the development and even the execution of that particular program. And so I think that was, there was that failure at the onset, but I think understanding the community needs and really going to the community instead of just asking them to come to you was truly helpful for us. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a lot of good takeaways for that. Thank you. Sounds good. Ben, do you have a story you want to share with me?
How many of you have ever seen the show The Golden Girls? I realize I need to work on my currency and my cultural references, but as Sophia used to say, picture this. It's Honolulu, it's 2013. Marriage equality is just about to become a thing. And we were there with the National Queer Asian Pacific Islander Alliance, bringing API LGBTQ organizations from around the country to Hawaii. And we were mindful about the hosts that were welcoming us and the unique issues that were happening in Hawaii, but also the tensions that had been stewing for 20 years, even before that. Because if anyone tells you that the modern marriage equality movement began in Boston or San Francisco, or even New York, it actually began in Hawaii, like 10 years before Massachusetts became the first state to officially recognize marriage equality. The Hawaii State Supreme Court brought the issue forward when it said that Hawaii's marriage laws preventing same-sex marriage were not constitutional. So they ultimately changed the constitution, but the discussions that happened really created fissures between the LGBTQ community, the Mahu that were there on the islands, and the mainstream LGBTQ movement that was us primarily coming from the States, from the continent, telling them what to do essentially. So we knew that we were stepping into a very sort of fraught environment, and we built relationships. We did everything in the organizer's handbook. We had kind of a brain trust of local folks. If folks know Kumuhina, Hina Wong Kalu, who is a famous Mahu activist in Hawaii. She helped craft the programming that we created. We brought folks to, it was called a detour, arranged by the Friends Society, the Quakers, where we visited these ostensibly tourist sites, but looked at them through an anti-colonial lens. Right, and so we drove by the commissary and we talked about militarism. We went to Iolani Palace, but instead of going inside, we were shown copies of the signatures that folks had signed by the thousands to protest the annexation of Hawaii. So we did all of this work and showed all of these folks who had never seen the history of Hawaii what anti-colonialism work in Hawaii looked like. And so we presented this program to them, and the Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders who were there felt like, even though we had consulted folks, we hadn't consulted them. And so they felt like they hear these folks from the continent telling us about our own history. And so there were many feelings. And so we ultimately pivoted. We created some flexibility in our program and had an accountability conversation. We let people sort of share their feelings. We let people talk about the work that they were doing. And ultimately, I think we came to a better place as a group. I described it later as we were being held accountable. And ultimately, Kumuhina chanted the oli that was performed at the signing ceremony when the governor signed marriage equality into law. So, I mean, I think my takeaway there is similar to what Sue said. You have to build relationships one by one, but also you have to be flexible, and it's not just sufficient to hear somebody, you have to listen to them.
Thank you very much, Ben. Okay, so before we go ahead and hand it off to Aaron to take the survey that I know you're supposed to take here, let me ask the final question for the panelists today before we take the questions from everybody in front of us here. What is the one thing that you want this audience to take away from our conversation today? Something for them to chew on as they head home, something for them to take back to their own communities, wherever they be coming from. Constancio, why don't we start with you, please?
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for that question, and again, thank you to everyone who's here and for inviting me to be a part of this discussion. So besides being understanding and acknowledging that you are a unit of power, I think one thing that I hope you will take away from this conversation is knowing that you do not have to wait until you are, for lack of better term, perfect to start making a change. You just have to be willing to do it and do it now and start it. Your lived experiences and your stories are very powerful. I always go back to, in my line of advocacy, I always go back to this public narrative framework by Marshall Gans that talks about story of your own story, story of self, story of us, and the story of now. And I use that in my line of advocacy, but also understanding that your story is powerful, that if you have questions, those questions are valid, and your voice ultimately is needed. And everyone needs to hear you, not someday in the distant future, but right now. And as a public servant and being part of government, I see government not as a machine it's not made up of machines or discrete elements, but it's made up of people. And I truly, truly believe that our government needs new people. And that's one of the reasons why I joined the board of directors at CAPAL, is because I truly believe that people like you need to be in government. People like you who care deeply about this country, asking the hard questions, and are willing to dream of something better. Each one of us are not meant to just blend into the system. But like I said a while ago, people like us are meant to build the system. So when you have that opportunity, take it and be a part of building it. Don't just observe government, but help reshape it.
Excellent words of advice. Sue, did you want to go ahead?
Sure. I would say that you need to dream big. And what do I mean by that? This Sunday, I was at UPenn's class of 29 alumni youth parent, and I was there with my goddaughter. Her parents don't speak English very well, and so they were not comfortable to attend. So I got the privilege to attend. And I met this young lady who walks in. You could tell when she walked in the room, she had this poised way about her. And she was actually Black. And there weren't that many Black people in the room. And when I spoke to her mom, she goes, "Oh, yeah, well, Rachel is going to be the future president of the United States." And I said to her mom, "I'm getting a photo with you because I know she could do it just by the way she carried herself." And then as I got to talk to her, she was Miss Maryland 2025, Miss Teen Maryland 2025. Then we started talking about Governor Moore because they're in Maryland. And she's like, "Yes, I've met Governor Moore and I interned on the Hill, and this is your time. But you're never going to be big unless you put that out there to the universe. And then you go ahead and go for those internships and set that plan of action, because dreaming alone isn't going to get you there." But I think for this group of people, you all know that. That's why you're here at CAPAL. That's why you're doing the internships. So set that plan and then network. Network. It is all about who you know. And start building that database, that community, because that's how you're going to get there. But yeah, and very, very important, as we keep talking about change, you need to also be flexible. You need to be flexible. You have to sometimes be willing to listen and look at, like Ben said, at the big picture. Because if you're only looking here and you're like, "This is how I want it," you're not going to get there. You got to be flexible and be able to work with all kinds of people. And trust me, there's a lot of kind of people out there.
Thank you, Sue. Ben?
Again, at the risk of jumping off of a point that Sue made, she talked about networking. How many of you have heard the word networking over the course of this summer? But she also used the phrase building community. So I think that every person you connect with this summer, especially in a summer like this, where you're seeing people from all over the country, you're seeing important people politically and in the community, every person you meet is an opportunity to build your community of change makers. So I would say continue to do that. If building community is a better way for you to think about it than networking, I know that that's how I look at it, but also recognize we are inheriting a community of change makers before us. I always think the phrase "we're standing on the shoulders of giants" is a little weird, because it's a weird image, but we are inheriting a legacy of warriors. We're inheriting a legacy of healers. We're inheriting a legacy of teachers. And so as you go forth to change the world around you, the person to your left or the person to your right, maybe someone that you're talking to and you're serving on a panel with them 30 years later. and you're watching their kid, who's in the audience as well. Sorry. But yeah, no, so the community that you build now, will hold you in good stead. So I would end with that.
Excellent. Before I turn this back over to Aaron, the one thing that I would like to say to take away is that, you're also bright-eyed and ready to go and take over the communities, but my message to all of you is, some of you are not gonna stay necessarily working in government or working in nonprofits. Some of you may decide to go corporate. And that's okay. That's my message to you guys. It's okay. There is a place for everybody, no matter where your path leads you. And in my case, having worked at 3 different tech startups, there is a bit there. Okay, for what my company that I work does is called Fuda, and what we do is we work with local and independent restaurants to get them workplace food programs, right? But these independent restaurants, the vast majority of them are owned and operated by people of color, by women, by first generation immigrants like myself. And that's why I'm passionate about what I do at my job, even though it is a full corporate startup job. I'm able to impact change, give these communities opportunities that they would never otherwise have. And I feel privileged every day to be able to give that opportunity to them. And that's my way that I make change in my own way. So please know that it's okay for those of you that go down that path. It doesn't mean you gave up on your core principles and everything that you're learning here, or that you lose connections with your friends that you make, whether you're here in DC or all the way in Hawaii. It doesn't matter. Just make sure that you stay true to your moral compass. Stay true to what it is that you value and take that path wherever it may lead you. So with that said, let me turn this back over to Aaron, who can lead us for the next portion.
Thank you very much for that. Let's give our panelists and speakers a round of applause, please. Those were very excellent takeaways, and I think had I been smart enough to be a CAPAL intern when I was going through it, I would have definitely benefited from that advice. So Chema, I think we have some surveys to pass out. So if you guys wouldn't mind, the feedback really helps us with future proofing our programming, helping make sure that the programming and the speakers that you listen to are valuable for you. That the programming that we do for you is meaningful and it feels that it improves your professional development for your network or whatever it may be, so that next year we can do it better. And then when you're an alumni and you come back, you can say, wow, I really helped shape this programming. So please do the survey for us. I would really appreciate it. While Sarul's passing out the surveys, do we have enough pens for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And so we can go ahead and have, Rodney start facilitating the Q and A after like a minute or so. And
Yeah,
then-
yeah. Give everyone a chance
And
to-
then Aaron finally close this out.
Sure, yeah.
Then we'll have a little bit of time for networking, and also for those of you who haven't eaten, feel free to grab a bite. And for those of you who'd like to take some food for lunch tomorrow, I think we'll have some extras.
Yeah, we still have plenty of food, so please do take some of it, otherwise. One of us will be laden with it in their car on the way home and then have 20 chicken and rice bowls to eat over the next couple of weeks.
So rule, our intern will be, watching the Zoom chat, right? Or
Okay.
any virtual Q and A. But we can start here.
We'll give it another minute or two here to fill out the survey. See who may have a question. Sounds to, how's the weather out in Hawaii right now? Is it around 12 PM over there?
I'm not even gonna share that. I know it's humid in DC. No, I actually miss being in DC, but yeah. No, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and wishing you all a good evening.
Stay with us. We're gonna do a question and
Oh,
answers.
okay.
Can't go to bed yet. That's what he's looking at. Oh, behind, oh, okay, so it's from the afternoon. Oh, look at you. Okay.
We can start with a, online.
Absolutely.
Sophia Khan has a question. She says, I would love to hear more about how you have arrived at your view of government. At the very beginning, Constantino mentioned something I hear a lot, that many people look at the government as the enemy, and the more I learned about history, the more I'm forced to recognize the questions of how a government that was born in some of can be reshaped to create equity and change. Why did you decide to enact change by working within government rather than working pressure outside of government?
Who wants to take that question first? Very, that was Sophia, right? Who asked? Thank you, Sophia Khan, for asking that question online. Excellent question. Who wants to answer that one first? Any of the government representatives here?
Start that. I mean, Constancio, I think you've been talking a little bit about it already, but I think that to me, it's an accountability thing. I mean, well, first of all, I should say that I spent an entire career in the nonprofit sector for 20 years, working on these issues, working on civil rights, kind of pounding the pavement on the Hill, being that voice of advocacy, and then kind of pivoting to government work. I think that it's a question of accountability. I mean, I think we're here to make sure that that this country holds itself to the promise that it has made to us, that we are a multicultural democracy, to the extent that that is under threat right now. But I think that the work that we do in city government, well, speak for myself, is to make sure that the work that our city does holds true to that promise. Do we get it right? We don't get it right. We're having conversations right now about the budget, about a lot of issues that make me question how I'm feeling about the things that we're working on. But I think that being comfortable with your core values and knowing why you do the work. I just came from Chinatown this morning and I saw a bunch of our seniors who are fixed income, who are immigrants, meet our chief of police. And so knowing the history of public safety, knowing the history of police, knowing that the police now are eager to come visit our immigrant communities, and that we're trying to make them better as a police department. If I didn't believe that we were able to make change, I would leave tomorrow and maybe join the corporate sector. I don't know. But I think it's a question of holding to your values and making change where you can.
Sancho, did you have anything you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, I mean, I do appreciate that question because as I had mentioned, I think my views are really coming from being a first generation immigrant, and I grew up watching how systems, whether in the Philippines or here, treated people differently based on their social status or class or income or how well they spoke English. And in those instances, sometimes government felt very distant, felt cold, bureaucratic, and sometimes harmful, right? And so I absolutely understand why people feel that sometimes government is the enemy, especially when it's been used as a tool of as like what you shared, colonization, exclusion, or erasure, like what we've been seeing. And so, but where it shifted for me, as I mentioned a while ago, is when I really looked at government not just as a machine, but really a group of people. And people are the ones who write policies. People are the ones who make decisions. And so I started asking that question, what if those people who are in those positions, included us. What if we weren't just asking for change, but we're actually making it? And that's why I decided that I should work in government. Because not so much to uphold the status quo, but to challenge it from within. I can complain about government all I want from the outside, but I feel like I have a little bit more ownership of my complaints if I am inside and I'm doing something about it, right? And so it's hard. Government is slow, it's complex. Sometimes it feels like you're trying to move a mountain with, I don't know, like a pen, right? But when a grant goes to a business that is about to go bankrupt and close its shop, or a family that finally gets an access to resources or a stipend to be able to stay at the apartment, in the apartment, I mean, that's when I know for myself that that fight is worth it. So, like I said, I don't believe that government is perfect, but I do believe that each of us have a responsibility to make it better, not just by yelling from the outside, but by building from within.
Thank you. Does anybody in the room have a question before I see if anybody else online has a question? Yes.
So in the work that you do, how do you work to ensure that individuals and families who come from very unique experiences are captured in the work that you do day to day?
Well, one very concrete way we do that here in the district is through our Language Access Act. Again, much love to our friends in California. I think our Language Access Act is probably modeled after the Diamond-Lee-Torres Act, as the policy nerd in me comes out. That requires a local government to provide translation and interpretation for folks who don't speak English, right? And so our office provides that service, particularly for the language communities that trigger that act, because there's a certain number of them who have limited English proficiency. This is the policy wonk answer to your question. But the three languages that are Asian or Pacific Islander that meet that threshold are Chinese, Vietnamese, and Korean. And so the real reason why we're the largest agency of our kind in the country is that we're required to help implement that Language Access Act. So we have staff who speak Chinese, who speak Korean, and who speak Vietnamese, and they're the ones who make sure that we're able to help that business owner get that grant. And that immigrant status, whether you're undocumented or not, or without unauthorized here, whether you are homeless, whether you don't speak English well, that should not serve as a barrier for you to receive services. So again, do we get it right? Not all the time, but the policy bones are in place for us to be able to do what we can to serve people.
I would say at Asian American League, one of the things that we're realizing is the new wave of immigrants that need support. And so the way that I'm going about it is we're actually acknowledging that we need more, let's say Mongolians or Bangladesh. And so we are networking with leaders in that community, because the biggest thing is you've got to overcome trust. And when, they come here and they don't speak the language and they don't understand how things work, by going and working in those communities individually, that's where they're going to start sending their kids to our programs and start opening up in that way. The other thing is kind of, I don't know if this really answers your question, but I feel like it's important to share, is that as an organization, we didn't realize this, but our photos on our website was not completely inclusive, meaning that we aren't really catering to a lot of Indian communities because, you know, our photos. And so then when we like start looking at it, we're like, what is really the image of our org or what are we promoting, right? And so we want other youths to feel like they belong, right? And so that is like for us to have this awareness that even among Asian Americans, there needs to be that diversity and making sure that everyone is seen.
Thank you. Do we have any questions online? Yeah. We have a live question in the room. Yes. please.
Oh, yeah. This is not necessarily the first question, but I was just wondering. When you were younger, you had public service aspirations or you had action aspirations in the minimum. Did you have like a strong conception of what was the ideal society was loving tradition? And I appreciate the act of taking action, but sometimes, you know, where do we go from here? You know, especially in terms of having a idea of a concrete possibility. Do you necessarily always have to have that when you're going through the motions, being in American aspiration points? Do you really have that, or do you develop that in time, and how has your perspective changed? Having this idea of listing you maybe, how you thought you can develop yourself.
That's Steve. Okay, Sue.
So, I grew up really poor. There's like, when I say poor, I'm talking about, we lived in Southeast Washington DC, in a community that was like drug infested. And there was 10 of us living in a 2-bedroom apartment. And, my bedroom was the walk-in closet floor with my sister. And I share that because my children today are like, we need our own bathroom, mom. So, growing up poor, I've always wanted to do something to give back to kids and women. Like that was just what I want to do. But life happens. And so I didn't go into nonprofit. I went into for-profit because I also know that being poor, I never ever want to not give my kids all the things I didn't get. So I hustled and I ran my business for 33 years. And then at some point I was like, how many hamburgers can you eat? And I wanted to give back. And so that's why I shift gears to doing the work that I'm doing now. So when Rodney was talking about like, you know, you may stay in nonprofit, you might not go to nonprofit, you might choose corporate. For me, it's like really thinking about what I lived through, what I went through. And now I take it a deep first step, not just because I fed my kids. They all now have jobs. I'm like, good, go to work. But now I think about making this world a little better for my grandchildren. And so I don't, you know, I think you just kind of got to go with it, but don't feel like if you don't end up saving the world at this moment, that's okay. It may come to you later. And if you would have told me like 10 years ago, I'd be doing this, I'd be like, yeah, you're out of your mind. I like money a little bit too much, but it changes. And so just go with it.
Sounds so, Ben, did either of you want to answer the question?
I would say, again, it's about holding true to your values, but also being open to the journey. I mean, I think when I was young, I was very politically naive. Like I came to DC, not unlike many other people with stars in my eyes, like wanting to be part of a national dialogue about something. There was this new medium called email that we were able to use. We created the first national listserv of Filipino student activists around the country. That was my cousin Liz that started that.
I remember.
Kapite L.
Yes.
But no, but I think I also, when I was applying for Hill internships, I applied to the Republican member who represented my parents' district. And I was very politically naive. So I would say that you all are light years ahead of where you could have been, if were you my age, at that time. But I guess it's also like you never know where the path will take you. I've had my first real job here, I found temping at Georgetown, and it was doing healthcare stuff. And I never fancied myself a healthcare person, but it built kind of a core set of skills and networks that I still rely on today. But I knew the change that I wanted to see in the world, and I like to think that I have stayed true to that. But you never know how you're gonna get to be able to change, the change that you want to see.
Constancio, I don't know if you wanted to answer that question at all.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. I didn't quite catch the question, but I think something about how do you know if that path is for you or something like that.
Right, about public
As a-
service, yes.
Right. Yeah. So I think for me, I like that question because, like I mentioned a while ago, I didn't really think that I was going to work in government or even in public service. I don't think you would know that right away. I just knew that at some point, I knew that I wanted to serve, and I paid attention to where I felt most useful, where what my talents are and how I can be of better service to my community. I think the path will reveal itself to you in two ways, whether it breaks your heart or something that lights you up, right? And for me, it was just painful to see communities being left out or ignored. People from immigrant communities who don't speak English or don't speak the right language, didn't know the system or didn't have the right connections, right? But it also lit me up when someone gets access to resources, something that they were told that they can't do, that they can't have access or they could never have. So I guess follow that feeling and lean into those roles where you could be that bridge. That's why I mentioned my role is really a relationship builder. And I think a lot of the panelists also mentioned that they're connectors, they're relationship builders. And I would say, always continue to show up for others. And as you show up in those instances, that path is going to clear up for you. You don't need all the answers right now, but if you keep showing up with purpose, with humility, with that service in mind, that right path doesn't show up. You are actually building that path for yourself, step by step.
Very insightful. Thank you, Constancio. To stay true to the timeline here, I'm going to pass the mic back over to Aaron, but I do want to thank all three of the panelists for joining us this evening and sharing their stories and their insights. And I hope that everybody found that to be very helpful as you navigate through your personal careers and your personal lives, and bring it back to whatever communities that you guys come from. So let me pass the mic back over to Aaron for some final remarks. Go for network.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, again, thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you, Sue and Constancio, for your thoughtful conversation this evening. I know just listening to the conversation, there were great takeaways here. I learned something, which is great. So I benefit from this event as well, even though I'm here just facilitating. So thank you for everyone who's here virtually tonight or here in person. You can register on our website at capal.org and view all of our upcoming events. You can also follow us on social media to learn more about our S&I and programs here in DC at the handle at CAPAL all one word, all lowercase. Well, we also want to thank our 2025 sponsors for their continued support of our programs and continue to provide opportunities for AA and HPI youth in the public service. So thank you for attending our sixth and final WLP session of the summer. And thank you all. Good night.
Mahalo, everyone. Maraming salamat.
Thanks, Constancio. I'll tell John you say hi.
Oh my God, I haven't seen him forever. Thank you so much, Riley. Thanks, Ben. Thanks to.
Oh, I must be.
Oh, picture, yes.
Picture.
Okay.
Three, two,
Yeah,
one.
right, like, that's two shapes, and then I saw it.
I know, and I was like, perfect.
No, I felt like a star here with all those paparazzi. I'm sure you get that all the time.
Thank you, guys. Have a good evening.
Okay, out of the hot
Thank you
seat.
guys so much.
Enjoy there.
Don't break.
Yeah, out of my seat.
Yeah.
Yeah.